Today we are interviewing comic book legend, former CEO and founder of Boom Studios, Ross Richie. Recently sold Boom Studios to Random House. We're going to talk about Ross, about his history in the comic book industry, and about the big sale of Boom Studios to Random House.
Yeah.
Brian is psyched for this one. We have on with us today former founder, CEO, and chairman.
I'll always be founder. I'm not
founder, former CEO, former board of directors,
chairman,
Ross Richie. Congratulations on the sale of Boom.
Thank you.
I hope that you're keeping yourself occupied since that sale. I know you've been very busy with everything going on.
I refuse to be occupied.
Are you fully retired now?
Lord, I hope so.
Okay.
I mean, look, the dream, we all sit around and we go, wouldn't it be really cool to not have to work?
Every day. I do that every day.
Yeah. And so, I am very lucky in that I do not have to work. And what is interesting is a lot of folks are like, but.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like, you be me for a second. Like, if you don't have to work, why do you, now the irony is my family is running me around like a top, man. Like, they've just got me spinning. I just made 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and I've got to pick up volleyball girls, and I got 2 fifth graders coming over this afternoon, and, I am full on, wearing the apron in the kitchen.
So you're a stay-at-home dad now. That's your new job.
It's yeah. I respect to stay-at-home dads, man.
Yeah.
I'm just getting run into the ground. These kids got me spinning.
That's good though, because you spent a lot of your life in the comic book industry. So growing up, were you a comic book fan? Were you, as a kid, did you read and collect and buy?
Yeah, I was my first comic book was in an Easter basket when I was 6 years old, and it was Fantastic Four 178.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I remember instantly thinking, if this corner box, the number in the corner says that there's 177 before this, I need to read every single last one.
Yeah.
Because one guy was made of fire and another guy was made of rocks, and I was 6, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And what I can see in retrospect is that I loved science fiction. Mm-hmm. And the Fantastic Four was particularly important because it was pretty heavy on the science fiction, and not like at that age, I was not drawn to Superman, who had to worry about a secret identity. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever read the 70s Superman books, they're very wrapped up in him protecting his secret identity. And Peter Parker and Spider-Man had a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in science fiction, and my dad had exposed me to Star Trek at the age of 4, which was in reruns back then.
Yeah.
And I loved science fiction. And then Star Wars came in 77, and it really hit me hard. And what's hard to explain to folks that were not around then is that there wasn't anything.
Right. Yeah.
And, I was kind of a Planet of the Apes fan by default because it was science fiction.
Right.
And anything that was science fiction, I gobbled up. But there wasn't a lot of movies or TV shows that were science fiction at that time. And so that's what really drew me to comics, was that I could then get something monthly that I could read. It was also the right age relative to, in elementary school, you don't read novels. That really doesn't kick in until you're in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade.
Yeah.
And I did the usual litany of, fantasy and science fiction novels in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
But being, in 2nd and 3rd grade, I could read a comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And it very quickly from 78 to 80 was kind of this golden age of all of those licensed toy comics.
Yeah.
That came out in the wake of Star Wars. And so I was big on the Micronauts, those first 12 issues that were drawn by Michael Golden.
Yeah.
I've Never Been the Same. That really kind of blew my mind. And then ROM,
Yep.
And Shogun Warriors was gigantic for me. Godzilla was gigantic for me.
Yeah.
And I kind of lived in that part of it. Was like the Star Wars comics, Godzilla, Shogun Warriors, Micronauts, ROM. I mean, when Shogun Warriors got canceled, like it was like a death in the family for me. Like that just I laugh about it now, but it was so I was like, what am I going to do? And then it wasn't until much later that I found X-Men 121, which is the first Alpha Flight, and that really rocked me. And that kind of was the superhero entry point. And so from there, I got into DC. And then by the time I was like 15, like I lived on the newsstand, I had no access to a comic shop. And then by the time I was like, it was funny when the Micronauts went comic shop only, I filled out a little card for a subscription because I couldn't get to a comic shop. And then when I was 15, that's when I finally started get my mom to drop me off at the comic shop. And I got a subscription to Comic Buyer's Guide. And I went really heavily into independent publishers. And so that era is like Pacific Comics and Eclipse and Kamiko. Kamiko was huge to me. I was still thrilled to probably 10, 12 years ago, I met some of the founders of Kamiko and fanboyed pretty hard. And all those early direct market, meeting Dean Mullaney, who founded Eclipse, was a big moment for me. Bill, I was lucky enough to get to be good friends with Bill Shanis, who's the co-founder of Pacific. And I got really, at that point, I kind of migrated away from Marvel and DC as much. My reading was maybe 10% of them, and I went much more into reading independent comics. And then I got out of comics because I found girls and got a car and dated and so I got back in college. And then my ultimate journey was after college, I went out to Los Angeles and I went to a convention that was local, and at the convention was Malibu Comics, and I got into a conversation with one of the guys at the booth, and they offered me a job. And it just so happened I had no aspirations to work in comics. I'm probably one of the only people that was a comic book fan who had no aspirations to work in comics that was offered a job in comics. So I needed to, it's crazy. And so I needed to pay my credit cards. I was unemployed and took the gig, and that was at Malibu Comics. And I know the two of you will appreciate this. I mean, wrap your head around how mind-blowing it is to that day you walk into the building. I was in charge of conventions. So what this meant was I was on day one, I was handed Barry Windsor Smith's phone number, Jim Starlin's phone number, Gil Kane's phone number, Howard Chaykin's phone number, the murderer's row of I remember flying into New York City and Kevin McGuire giving me a personal tour of New York City. I mean, on foot. It was just, I was so happy. It was such a delightful experience. And I was there until Marvel bought the company. And so I saw all of that. And then shortly thereafter, I remembered that I moved out to LA to work in the movie business, and I resigned from my position to go work as a script reader, and worked for William Morris, and eventually got to the place where I read scripts for Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Really?
Nice.
That's interesting.
Now, just to back up a little bit, you were at Malibu from what, 91 to 93, you said? Or
I think it was more like 93 to 95. It could have been 96.
Okay, yeah, so it's good because the Marvel purchase is a little bit later. Were you there when they were doing things like the Ultraverse and that kind of stuff?
I want to say my first month was like, I'm probably going to get these dates wrong, and I'm sure people can correct me, but it's like I showed up after Prime #1.
Gotcha.
And so I want to say that was August or September, and then I think I showed up in October.
Right.
So I remember it was Prime 2
Mm-hmm.
was, I think, the first issue that I was there for.
Yeah.
And so it's like the Ultraverse had been launched.
Yeah.
And it was like, here I get to stuff boxes to send to retailers. I had half the retailers in the United States and conventions. That was my job.
That was going to be my other question was what exactly did you do there? Like you said, you were in charge of conventions, but like for those of us who've never really been inside, what does that mean exactly?
Well, there had been problems. So the business has changed a lot. But at that time, the sales in the business were just through the roof.
Yeah.
And so the books were super profitable. And so Malibu would often fly a creator in for a convention, or they would cut a deal to have the convention sponsor the creator.
Mm-hmm.
The logistics of that, of who paid for what, was actually over my head. So I'm not sure I can actually speak to any of that. But the point was that there had been creators who showed up for a convention and they didn't have a hotel room.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so the company's perspective was that can never happen again.
Okay.
And so I was very focused on everybody had a booklet. And so every staff member that went to a convention would have a binder that would have all the information in it, or a stapled packet that had, what the hotel reservation was, a copy of the receipt so that they could show staff who was telling them that the hotel room wasn't there, and this irrefutable packet that it was sort of idiot proof.
Right.
And then that was provided to the creators. And so sort of my job one, the message I got loud and clear was like, nobody ever can complain about, I didn't know, or like, where was my plane ticket, or like, so I, to my knowledge, I never had any trouble with that. And so I had to handle conventions, and then retailers are often, back then, again, when comics were selling really well, and there was a promotional budget, we had a lot of pins and posters and promotional material. And I would assemble packages. My phone would ring and it would be some guy in Idaho and be like, "Hey, I want to promote Malibu in my store." And I'd be like, "Great, give me your address and we'll get you a promo box in the mail."
Right. Oh, so you dealt with a lot of the retailers. So you knew a lot of the people.
Yeah. So Alan Payne, who works at Dynamite now, was the guy who had the east of the Mississippi, and I had the west of the Mississippi.
It's funny how back then, if you really think about it, how comic books, especially in the early to mid 90s, how the sales were, like you said, through the roof, and how comic conventions were so much different than.
Yes.
And today, I mean, you really see a reversal there. The sales of comics are not as good as it, but comic conventions are out of control. I was just at New York Comic Con last weekend. It was insanity. And I went to a couple of the smaller ones in New York. It was at the hotel years ago. Yep. And comparing that to what they do now, it's
like back when it used to be at the Penta.
Across from Madison Square Garden. That's exactly where I went a couple times.
Yeah, I've seen 35 years of shows at New York for sure. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, no. Like, okay. So this is a hilarious old man story. So, so 20 years ago, I was at the Book Expo, and I was just launching Boom, and Reed came by, and they had a flyer. And they were like, "We're going to do a New York convention." Now, if you know your New York conventions, no one's ever done a New York convention since Phil Seuling died.
Right.
Because I think he died in 82.
Yeah.
Right. So it'd been 20 years. And the old Fred Greenberg shows were very the Great Eastern shows, right? They were catch as catch can. Right.
Yeah.
And so here comes Reed Pop, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to do it." And literally, that poor guy, like, he handed me this flyer, and I was like, "Ha ha ha!" And I put the flyer down. Good luck.
And that was 20 years ago, and now look today.
Yeah, sure enough, they did it. Yeah, look, Reed's a great company. So, look, it wasn't like they didn't have challenges, but they, that first year that show was a bit of a boondoggle, but that's okay. They did it, man. Hats off to them.
They really, I mean,
look, New York's a tough town to do anything. New York's a tough town to get a cup of coffee, much less, I live in LA, so
I don't know if we're here. We are. We're both New York.
Yeah, we are.
We're from New York. We're in New York right now. I've lived my entire life here.
Couldn't tell.
You couldn't. Sorry. You got to see when I go to other places. Right away.
Yeah, it's very.
I'll give you a secret. You're not passing as coming from any other part of the country.
So here's a good question. Can you tell where I'm from in New York?
Oh, no. Okay. Now that I used to be able to do that.
Regional accents.
Like in the 90s. Yeah. In the 90s, I could tell the Queens. Now, see, this isn't fair because I've watched previous podcasts because I think you're from Staten Island.
We're from Staten Island.
I actually grew up on Long Island.
I've lived here for life.
So I can tell from the G's with Long Island.
Yeah. Long Island.
You pronounce the G's,
yeah,
right? Now, I can tell a Brooklyn accent, and I used to be better at parsing a Queens accent from a Brooklyn accent.
Yeah.
Now, I could probably fake my way through it enough, and I had a 50-50 shot that I could look cool.
You narrowed me down.
But my favorite thing for New Yorkers is to point out they never notice that they pronounce it's Manhattan.
Yeah.
We don't know we have an accent.
Right. Well, I think your response is, I don't have an accent. You have an accent.
What do you mean?
But so many people over the years have told me that Brian and I are in our day jobs. We're both teachers. So we talk all day, every day.
Did you just say talk?
He did.
Talk.
I caught it.
I don't have an accent.
Now the question is, you've probably done your research, so you know this answer. But the question is from my accent, can you tell where I'm from?
Texas, right?
Yeah, Texas.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell from the accent though. We did our research ahead of time.
What part of Texas?
San Antonio.
San Antonio. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you give me a beer and give me some football, and you'll hear it.
Yeah, I was going to say that Texas also has some regional accent though, too, right? Like further.
That's true.
The accent is a lot different, right? Than where
for folks that are not from the area, the easiest way to differentiate is when you hear someone say the word OIL, and it sounds like all.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's West Texas.
Yeah.
Right. So, but there's a northern, a southern, an eastern, and a western accent in Texas.
Yeah. And I know the eastern accent is influenced by Louisiana a little bit.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
See,
yeah. Houston's pretty close.
That's why I keep you around.
See, I know.
So you grew up in San Antonio. When did you get your first comic shop there?
So this is kind of fun and interesting. Texas has always been deep in comic book fandom. I just didn't have a car.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And my bike, it was further, it's too far for my mom to feel comfortable with me riding my bike there.
Right.
Because San Antonio, believe it or not, is a much bigger city than people think it is.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, it was 1 million people. And it's bigger than Dallas now.
Really?
But of course, it depends. Yeah. The thing about Dallas is it depends on how you count Dallas. Is it Dallas, or is it Dallas-Fort Worth, or is it Dallas-Fort Worth-Arlington?
Right.
Because it's a large metroplex. But big city, and so riding your bike to the comic shop was a little too far.
Sure.
But the thing, some of the earliest fans that were famous was the Texas Trio, and they were known in the early '60s. And I mean, I want to say, I'm going to be bold, and I'm going to say the first major convention outside of New York City was in Houston.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And the Texas Trio, one of those three guys is the founder of mycomicshop.com, or Lone Star Comics.
Yeah. We've been buying from them for a long time.
Yeah. And so the Saunders family, Conan runs it now, his son. And so that is a really deep fandom that goes back to the mimeograph fanzines that were circulated and the APAs, which, if your viewers don't know, APA stands for Amateur Press Association. So people would write articles and draw drawings and circulate. And that whole fandom is really a more contemporary example is Rob Liefeld was a very active member of the West Coast Teen Titans APA world. And, real professionals came out of that fandom.
Well, that
runs
actually
deep in Texas.
Right. That used to happen a lot more often with fandoms, where
Yes.
you see the fandoms were, I'm trying to think of the right word for it. They were generators for creators.
So farm team.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So Dark Horse, like one of the things that I think has been lost to the sands of time is that Paul Chadwick, the creator of Concrete, and Chris Warner, who did Black Cross, when you go back and you look at Dark Horse Presents #1, those guys were all in Portland, my understanding is, and were before both those guys had actually worked on, Chadwick had worked on Dazzler and Warner had worked on Moon Knight, but they came out of that Portland fanzine. They were all APA's members along with Mike Richardson, who founded Dark Horse. So, like, Dark Horse is a result of the APA and the fandom world.
Yeah. It's
and the black and white boom.
It's interesting.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Which one? I'm sorry?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Well, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, when it sold, there was a black and white boom, and there was like 50 publishers that got launched, and Dark Horse was one of them.
Right.
And then they were kind of the last man standing of that wave from the 80s.
Right. That was around the time that I started really getting into like independence. I wasn't a Ninja Turtles fan at all.
But you bought Turtles. Who didn't?
I probably did.
Of course you did. Everyone.
I probably have issues, but I never really followed it for some reason. But a ton of like super influential books came out in that time period.
Faust.
We've talked about Faust on the show before, by Vigil and Quinn, and man, just so much.
I was always scared of Faust.
Oh, I got grounded.
I kept walking.
Yeah.
So that scared me.
We just had him on. We just had David Quinn on.
Yeah.
It was Turtles 3 was my first Turtles book.
Oh wow.
And that, like, there was so much energy. It was so exciting. Like, getting that book, it was such a fantastic mixture of two things. The first is it was a garage band in all the positive ways, right? It felt like the Ramones. It was like, here are these guys, and like, I'm not looking at Barry Windsor Smith artwork, right? It's like these guys, insanely talented, great idea, terrific fun. Like that issue of #3, if you go and look at it, the storytelling is like a 10 out of 10. Like, its fundamentals are so powerful. But when you looked at it, you were like, oh, I could draw comics. And that's why it launched like 50 companies. Like Malibu was launched out of the black and white book. And so it inspired, that maybe the example is like the Velvet Underground. Everybody always talks about, 50 people went to see the Velvet Underground and all 50 of them started a band.
They all made bands.
Yeah, it was just inspirational. And then, so there was that. And then there was just the tremendous talent. Like, it was just, they had no formal training or experience. They weren't coming to it from working at Marvel and DC.
Right.
And it was just this, it's like in music, how you can just hear somebody knows how to write a song.
Yeah.
Right. They just completely got it. They understood what made it work. And there was an interesting influence of like Heavy Metal magazine that wasn't typical for mainstream direct market comics. Anyway, I could talk about the Turtles forever. I just remember #3 just absolutely blew me away. Like, I couldn't believe what I was looking at.
See, but it's funny because it's funny that you say that, because actually my first issue of Turtles was 3 also, and then I went back and bought it was like print #7 of issue #1. I had to have 1 and 2. I had to have 1 and 2 beforehand. But to me, the thing that always got me about Turtles is I loved comic books growing up as a kid, but when Turtles hit, it was cool. Like, everyone saw that it was cool. It wasn't just like, it wasn't looked at like a Superman comic book or a Spider-Man comic. The Turtles were cool. And even the kids in school who didn't read comic books knew who the Turtles were right, like, early on. Like, it was...
It's interesting, and this is just too much detail, but it's like, if you go back and you look at like those first 5 issues, the covers, I think they were inspired by Ronin. Certainly the first issue was.
Oh yeah.
But there's I'm thinking of the cover of #4 particularly, is like the characters are always posed really cool. And there's something about the way that the creators believed that the characters are badass, that they weren't cute Like the cartoon version hadn't happened yet.
Right.
And so it's absent of a goofiness to it.
Mhm.
It has a seriousness to it. And I think that edginess is what you're talking about, of like, they're just taking this really serious. And like, you hand that to your friend in high school and they're like, what is this?
That's exactly it. It was kind of like an underground comic.
Yes.
You know, we in the early 80s, they were kind of not around anymore. It wasn't like the 70s.
Right.
We had all these cool. That was, to me, and it was one of those things where when you were experiencing it, you could see that it was a change, that there was something was happening. This isn't, it's not going to be Marvel and DC anymore. We're going to get a whole flood of these strange creatures coming and, you know, comic books based on not the norm.
Well, yeah, and it's
go ahead.
It
was that and Dark Knight and Watchmen and Electro Assassin. There were all these books coming up. Sorry, go ahead.
No, they were. I was going to say they were all in the same time period. They were all like 83 to like 87. You know, all that stuff just explodes.
It became cool.
Yeah, and
So this is where I'm going to plug our mutual friend Howard Chaykin, because I think if you go back and you look, you know, there's a lot of science fiction books, but they're not sophisticated.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But like when you read American Flag, it's trying to not just do a superhero comic in space.
Happened to have that sitting on the side of me.
I'm
recollecting it right now, as a matter of fact.
It's
just so, it's different. Yeah.
The craft in it is, and see, I think that's a cornerstone. I know Frank Miller, Alan Moore. I mean, Alan Moore wrote American Flag.
Yeah.
Like, you know, so Alan was coming after Howard.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that is a keystone to launch this more sort of sophisticated things like Electro Assassin coming after, you know, where it's like, it's a very intense, very focused, you know, like it's really trying to raise the bar.
Yeah.
And not just be like, because you forget about how formulaic superhero comics were. It was like fight scene, exposition, drama, melodrama, rather, off we go. Characterization was not necessarily very thick.
Right.
Well, it's funny because at Boom, you didn't do a lot of superhero comic books. You did a lot of more, you know, more gritty, you did a lot of movie stuff. Which, I'll be honest with you here, my love of Boom comes from a lot of your movie properties, because you do a lot of things that I love, like Big Trouble in Little China happens to be one of my all-time favorite movies. Escape from New York, one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah.
Your Planet of the Apes run is probably one of the best Planet of the Apes runs ever done. And the fact that you said earlier that Planet of the Apes is really one of those things that got you into science fiction, and then you actually were the person behind the comics, is you know, it's cool to me.
I got some fun stories about that. So with Apes, what was hilarious was I went to the licensing show in Las Vegas looking for things to license, and nothing was popping out to me. And so Fox had a
how does that work? How does a licensing show like that work? Like, what is who's there? Is like the Planet of the Apes? It's an old property, and you know, has been owned by different companies.
Well, that's the part of the story that's going to be interesting.
Okay.
Like what'll happen, the way the licensing show kind of functions is, you know, I'll give you an example of like, she's really more of an acquaintance than a friend, but like Danny Festa, who she represented the rights to Trolls. Now, if you remember, Trolls were the little things you put on your pencil and you go like that, and they and Danny was a licensing agent who represented those rights, and what she was doing was she was going around trying to get people to license the Trolls in other media. Then here comes the movie. They do this movie deal where they create a story around it, right? And then at the licensing show, they know that this movie's coming. It's going to come on a specific date. And typically there's vendors who go there, and these people are businessmen, so they're not creatives. And so let's say the bad example is they do shower mats, right?
Yeah.
And they have a deal and they put their stuff in Target and Walmart, right? And so they walk in and they go, okay, DreamWorks, what do you have coming out for kids? Okay, I'm going to license Trolls. I'm going to license, Minions. blah, blah, blah. I'll sign this up. Disney's expensive. I'll go to Universal and I'll rather back their movies. And then they sign up for shower mats and they ship that. And so there's just a lot of commerce, right? And so the people that have these booths, they're like, here's our schedule. We have this TV show that's on Netflix and it's going to, we're looking at Q4 of 2025 is when, as a licensor, you have time to sign up, manufacture your product, get it, made in Asia, ship it in a cart, and we'll get it into Target. Yeah. It's very much like that. Right. And so I was running around looking for stuff, and I made an appointment at Fox, which, they're like, who are you and why do we care? Right. Mm-hmm. And I remember I sat down with a licensing rep at Fox, and I was like, I want to license Planet of the Apes. And she was like, what? I was like, well, I want to license Planet of the Apes. She was like, really? I was like, yeah. She was like, well, there's not at the time, there's no movies. Like the Tim Burton movie was over. Yeah. Right? Wasn't considered a hit. Yeah. Right. And so she was like, why, kind of like, okay, why don't you submit a proposal to me? And I was like, look, comic book fans remember Planet of the Apes. Now, I worked at Malibu. Now, before Aliens versus Predator, #1, the best-selling independent comic book of all time was Malibu's Planet of the Apes #1. Mm-hmm. Now, I wasn't there when it was done, but I remember my boss, Tom Mason, telling me, oh, yeah, Planet of the Apes #1 from us was the best-selling independent comic book of all time. I'm like, outsells the Turtles? Yeah. Okay.
That's pretty amazing.
And then Aliens versus Predator came out. Mm-hmm. And beat that number. Yeah. But I remember like those guys were still in the comic shops. And so that was how we ended up licensing Planet of the Apes. Now I'm going to tell you my John Carpenter story.
Let me tell you, before you start, we love John Carpenter. Enormous John Carpenter. We love him.
You will love him more after this. Mm. So I, through the years, became friends with John's wife, who is a terrific person and absolutely wonderful. And I would call her up and talk to her about Escape from New York and Big Trouble in Little China. And we went back and forth about, did Fox have the rights or did John have the rights, blah, blah, blah. Finally, we got a deal done for Big Trouble in Little China. And our thought was to get Eric Powell to write it. And so Eric signed on. And so we flew Eric out to LA, picked him up at the airport, and I drove Eric over with my editor-in-chief, Matt Gagnon, to John's house to meet with John, because we wanted it to be as John as possible. Right. So we go to John's home office, and we sit down, and John's sitting at his desk, and he's got a pile of Goon graphic novels. Mm. And he smacks these graphic novels. Bam, bam, bam. He's chain smoking. Bam, bam, bam. You, what do you do? And Powell's like, can't talk. Powell's like, I wrote, and he's like, he hits the graphic novels. He's like, these are good. Mm. Like, you're good. Great writer, great artist. He turns to Matt Gagnon. He's like, who are you? And Matt's like, I'm the editor-in-chief. He's like, turns to me, you, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm the publisher. And he's like, F you. Talking to me. And he turns to Powell and he goes, we're going to do whatever we want to do. And I was like, this is the best John Carpenter moment I could ever hope for. Like, this is what, like, Snake Plissken just told me to stick it. Like, I'm so happy.
It was awesome. Fantastic. So from at your time at Boom Studio, it seems like a lot of the things that you made into comic books were stuff that you personally liked, the Planet of the Apes and the John Carpenter stuff. What are you most proud of that you put out there?
Well, it's interesting because I think it's a mix of, there were things that I published that I knew that there was an audience for, because on a certain level, the way I regarded the company was, it isn't Ross's plaything. Mm-hmm. Like, once you start hiring people, right, it's not you putting a show on in your backyard. Yeah, like, right, you got to put food on the table. There's people that are showing up in the morning and they expect to get paid. And so it doesn't need to be Ross's favorite thing for it to, pay the bills. So I will tell you that maybe my favorite era. It's so hard to talk about what's your favorites, and I have so many different favorites from different time periods.
Mm-hmm.
And the company morphed and changed and went through so many different things. But the zone where, like, Once and Future is one of my favorite series we ever published from Kieran Gillen and Dan Mora.
Yeah.
And then Something is Killing the Children, and We Only Find Them When They're Dead, and Seven Secrets. Like, I remember sitting down and reading Once and Future and then Something is Killing the Children, and just thinking to myself, like, my brain was smoking.
Mm. Yeah.
And knowing, Seven Secrets is one of my favorites as well, knowing that we had Seven Secrets coming and We Only Find Them When They're Dead. Like, all four of those series are so good. And I, in particular, have a fondness for those creators. And, I have so much love for Kieran. I have so much love for James. And those artists. Dan is just one of the best dudes that you'll ever meet. It's just, there's a lot of personal relationship. And I think that it was such a back-to-back run. One of the things that's lost to the sands of time was that people thought that Once and Future was a huge book. Yeah. People don't understand how well that sold. Yeah. And it was released around the time of Berserker. And so Berserker gets so much attention, and rightfully so, that it kind of overshadows, like, Once and Future would have been such a big hit that people would be talking about that if it wasn't for Something is Killing the Children being, 4 weeks later. Right. And so it's just a very rich time period for the company. I'm really proud of the work that we did. It's really good material. The editorial was doing an excellent job. It's just great all the way around. And I'll tell you, Matt Gagnon is the one that really chased Kieran. Mm-hmm. And he knew that the way to get Kieran's attention was with Dan Mora. And that was just such a genius move. Deserves all the credit for that.
Now, with the James Tynion is really, he's having quite a moment in the last few years with the stuff he's been doing.
Let's just go with decade.
Yeah, he's really, wow. Some of the stuff he's putting out is just, Blue Book from Image was, we were blown away by that. Like, did not know from it. And
I'm so happy for him. James, so Matt Gagnon, my editor-in-chief, and I went to E3. Mm-hmm. I said E3. C2E2.
C2E2.
Mm-hmm. Specifically to recruit James to come to Boom. And that I remember meeting in the little, just off the convention show floor. It was like a little hot dog stand. And talking to him about what would he be interested in. And, Matt Gagnon was always interested in teenage protagonists and YA as a category. And James coming back with The Woods as an answer to that.
Yeah.
And, James, like, the thing about James is he works really hard, and he's super focused, and he's insanely driven. Mm. And none of that's an accident.
Yeah.
It's like he knew who he was. Like, when he was in high school, he was like, I want to be a comic book writer. And he chose what college to go to based on that. And when he was at college, he changed his course curriculum to focus on that.
Right.
He's such a testament to knowing who you are and going and getting it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That really
is. And Matt Gagnon deserves credit for, sort of understanding the area that James would find interesting with The Woods and that book. And it was just the way all that came together. And then, we published James for a long time before Something is Killing the Children happened. Mm-hmm. And then, I remember that first issue, it was originally not intended to be the giant epic that it became.
Yeah.
And we were sort of, plotting behind the scenes to lure James into it becoming, we wanted it to be bigger. Mm-hmm. And I think James's schedule was a little challenged, but once it really turned into a phenomenon, he found a rhythm in his schedule.
Yeah, it's a great series.
It's 4 million copies sold right now.
Wow.
by the way.
And
Really?
and they're
That's
looking
incredible.
to make that into a movie. Is that what
TV show.
TV show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is it moving forward or? Because
Oh, if you think I'm going to talk about that on a podcast, we just met. We just met. You know I love you. You know I love you.
we have
You always edge up to that.
It's funny because we've done that before with creators where they'll say something like that where they're not supposed to say it, and then we'll get an email the next day. Please edit that part out
from someone like me.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
I may get in trouble with my
Yeah.
You brought up a lot of names. You've worked with some of the greats in the industry over the last couple of decades. Who really stands out to you besides the ones you've mentioned already? Like, who did you really like working with?
Well, this is where I get to tell a Keanu story, right? So, the thing that you're not going to believe is if you've read Berserker, like that is exactly what Keanu pitched.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Matt Kent deserves all the credit for everything because he's a genius. But basically what Kent did was he put Keanu's story in panel form.
Right.
And that first meeting with Keanu was 2 hours. I sat down and he stood in front of me and he pitched Berserker, and like every single thing, all of the germane big moments,
Right.
he acted them out in front of me.
Yeah.
And then he came back the next week. Like we did 6 story sessions and they were all 2 to 3 hours long. I remember one Saturday we went to the Fox lot and we had a conference room rented out and it was like all day.
Yeah.
Like my kids were really young and I was trying to figure out, like, my wife's getting killed. Like I got to figure out how to beg off. And I was like, who does that? Who is like, sorry, Keanu, I gotta go.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think people understand, like, that's his story. People think like, oh, well, did he write? He just threw some. No. Everything.
Yeah.
Like that's his vision. And to sit there and be the recipient and hear and listen, it's just, then we brought Kent in. And then we had more story meetings.
Yeah.
And it got to a certain point where I gave it to Matt Gagnon. I was like, you just take the ball here.
Yeah.
But that was amazing.
What's amazing is that Keanu, being such a big star, tells his story to Boom, because if you think about it, he could have gone anywhere.
But he comes to you with that story, so he reaches out to you with that.
It just it's what we know, what we think we know about him anyway.
Right.
Is that he doesn't go to one of the big twos. He goes to an independent publisher. You know what I mean? And
yes,
that's remarkable.
Yeah, well, if you look, I don't know anything, so let's just start with that. But if you look back at The Matrix, the Wachowskis made comics.
Yeah.
But The Matrix was created by Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Which owned DC, and DC didn't do the comics.
Right.
And so it doesn't really surprise me. Keanu demonstrated that he understood. He absolutely read comics in the 80s.
Yeah.
He made too many references.
Yeah.
They were authentic.
Yeah.
Like he knew who Frank Miller was in the 80s. But I also know that the Wachowskis definitely educated him with Jeff Darrow and those folks.
Yeah.
From the 90s. And so he knows independent comic book publishing.
Right.
And so it doesn't surprise me that he would know that he's not going to be able to tell his story at DC or Marvel.
Yeah.
That they're servicing their superhero universes, which is their job.
That's what they do. Sure. That's their product.
So he wanted a story told exactly how he wanted it told, and that's what Boom did for him.
Right. Which is what you're saying. Like it was his story, because if it was a publicity stunt, he would have gone to DC or Marvel.
Right.
But it was a real thing.
He wanted a comic book.
He wanted to make a comic book. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And I find, like, generally speaking, my encounters with Hollywood, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of folks that are visible and high end, folks that you would know.
Yeah.
And they have all the money in the world,
Yeah.
and their time is very precious. They are scheduled to the nines.
Yeah.
And so if they're interested in doing comics, they understand that it's not going to make them rich.
Right.
And they like comics and they're interested in it as a form. And I think we get so wrapped up in the celebrity part of this that we forget that they're artists. You know, they're creative people.
Absolutely.
And so when something's creative and interesting, they get excited and they start to get really drawn in.
Yeah.
You know? So,
it's funny. Well, I talk to people who have been, and I don't get to a lot, but when you listen to people who work in the entertainment industry, a lot of the ideas that people have about entertainment is usually kind of wrong. Like the idea that everyone in Hollywood is some sort of greedy, you know, self-absorbed something or other. It turns out to be a lot less true more often than we realize, you know, that these people look at themselves as artists. They think of themselves as artists, and what they're doing is, they're not thinking about, you know, making as much money as possible. That was never a guarantee going in. So, you know what I mean?
My experience with the stars wanting money is about they don't want to be screwed or taken advantage of.
Right.
And so they worry about, and you know, the studios play games, right? So if you can pay a nickel for, you know, Tom Cruise, pay a nickel for Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so they're more on guard about their downside than they are worried about their upside.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And at some point, an agent's going to show up and an attorney's going to show up and they're going to make things difficult because that's their job.
Yeah.
Right. And so the stars don't worry about that. So what the stars worry about is this fun? Is this creative?
Yeah.
And am I going to be taken advantage of? And, you know, like, I'll give you an example of, like, as surreal as this is, like, I was in a conversation with Slash one time. And so I was trying to figure out how to do a comic book with Slash. And he didn't have any particular interest in, he loved the space, but he didn't want to write a comic book, and he, you know, he didn't have any particular ideas.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it'd be interesting. You know, I always find creative people's perspective is unique.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that comics can do is it can visually, dynamically portray, you know, like if I could, you know, like my vision was the stories I could tell now. My vision was, I was like, if I could get Slash in the room with Jason Aaron, and Slash could start talking about music, and Jason Aaron could figure out how to put that on the page, right? Like, that'd be cool, right? And I went to Emerald City, and I saw Jason. I was like, "Hey, so what do you think of Slash?" And he was like, "Oh, I don't like Guns N' Roses." I was like, "No, damn it! I have a meeting with Slash Tuesday." No, I didn't tell Jason that, but you know, I was like, "Ah, all right." But anyway, with Slash, you know, as soon as that, he could tell the conversation was good. Slash is awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
Easygoing, awesome, kind.
Yeah.
So smart.
Right.
So smart. Like, not the rock star, like, whatever you're thinking.
Yeah.
Right. Just down to earth, awesome dude. Loves skateboarding. Just so cool.
Yeah.
BMX. Right. Love BMX. And so we're just talking back and forth, and I'm like, I started like, well, did you ever think? I showed him. I don't know if you know, there was a Jimi Hendrix graphic novel that Bill Sienkiewicz fully painted. If you have not seen this, you have got to get your hands on this. Like this. Do you like Bill Sienkiewicz's paintings?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
It will tear the top of your head off.
Really?
Like, it is so clear how much Bill loves Hendrix, because it's every page makes your eyes melt. It's so cool.
Right.
And I went to my office and I pulled this out and I was like, "Hey, Slash," because Slash is going to love Jimi Hendrix, right?
Yeah, sure, of course.
And as soon as I did that, you could tell, like, there was so many life conversations that had happened from book publishers. It was like, it suddenly turned into like a $2 million conversation.
Yeah. And
I like gently backed off because, like, I don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
That ain't going to happen. And I don't want to be like, "Sorry, bro, you're not worth it," because God knows he is.
Yeah.
Right. You know, so, but These are stories I could tell now.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
Because
so
I'm
wait,
retired.
so there's a lot more. So we're gonna have you on a second time to tell.
Can I ask you a question about the sale? No details.
Maybe.
But
Yeah, probably not, but go ahead.
of course. But the fact
Yes.
that Boom was bought by Penguin Random House,
Yes.
does this indicate? Is this another indicator, you think, of the fact that comics are sort of becoming more bookstore properties than they are becoming like specialty store
And
properties?
this is what we've been discussing lately to ourselves. We see a decline
Sure.
in the monthlies and people going to their local comic shop to buy comics and maybe going more to bookstores.
Look, it's the pie's getting bigger,
Yeah.
but the periodical is alive and well in North
Okay.
America, so don't worry about that.
Mhm.
What this is about is books generally do not grow. I'm not fresh on. Penguin Random House has a really clean way that they talk about this, and I'm going to screw it up, but it's approximately it's this.
Mhm.
The CFO from Penguin Random House, said to me, he's like, it's fixed number of people in the U.S. that read books. They read 7. It's like a per capita. It's like you read 7 a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And the Bertelsmans is a family that owns Penguin Random House. And he was like, what, they have all the money in the universe,
Yeah.
but they care about literacy.
Mhm.
Okay.
And he's like, our mission statement is to get people to read 8 books a year, not 7.
Okay.
Okay.
And he's like, I don't care if it's a cookbook.
Mhm.
I don't care if it's a graphic novel.
Okay. Mhm.
I don't care if it's Catcher in the Rye.
Right.
He's like, do I want people to read more literary things? Of course I do.
Mhm.
But my job is to move it from 7 books a year to 8 books a year.
Okay.
And see, graphic novel publishing
Mhm.
has been growing like a weed.
Yeah.
And generally, book publishing grows very incrementally.
Mhm.
And so, any area where you see things popping in book publishing, you're going to see heat, and there's going to be merger and acquisition conversations.
Sure.
And that's what it's about.
Mhm. Okay.
And really, obviously, we've seen the graphic novel space retail grow.
Yes.
And it goes through cycles where it gets overrepresented and it shrinks a little bit, but then it goes back and but it ain't going away.
Yeah.
And when was the last time that you saw a new area open up in a bookstore?
It's true.
It just doesn't happen.
No.
Right.
Right. So that's where you're seeing attraction and heat.
Mhm.
And I'm going to call this now, so we'll laugh about this 10 years from now.
Okay.
What's going to happen to all those kids reading Dogman?
They're going to be looking for something else, of course.
right.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So there's so much publishing in graphic novels now.
Mm.
Paul Levitz is on my board for 10 years, and he and I would laugh about Raina Telgemeier. If people might be listening, don't know who Raina is, she wrote and drew Drama, which was published by, I believe it was Scholastic. It was one of the
Yeah.
best-selling graphic novels, sold millions of copies.
Yeah,
I don't know
they
where
were
it is now.
They were
Yeah.
enormous,
But-
especially for junior readers, like middle school readers, especially. Those are huge.
Girls.
Yeah.
Girls.
Yeah.
So Paul estimated that there was, at the time, this is a 10-year-old conversation, but Paul was estimating that there were 500,000 readers in comic shops,
Yeah.
Okay.
and estimating that Drama had sold 2 million copies.
Right.
And so Paul is like, 80% of comic book readers in North America are junior high girls.
Yes. Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
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 And we don't see that. We don't think about that because we've got our Green Lantern rings on.
Right.
Sure.
Right. And we're swinging from skyscraper to skyscraper in New York City.
Right.
And we're just not paying attention to the fact that now I have 2 girls. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. And so they rip through comic books, graphic novels.
Yeah.
They were raised on Raina. They blasted through all the Dogmans.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen with them in 10 years? They're going to, that whole part of the New York book publishers are paying attention to that in a way that the
Yes.
direct market publishers are not.
Oh, that's
No,
interesting.
I'm not throwing stones.
No.
Like I used to be a direct market publisher, and Lumberjanes aside, and some other things.
Yeah.
That was not our focus. And
Right,
so I'm not saying, I always see these fan conversations online where they're like, Marvel and DC are doing it all. I'm like, you run Marvel and DC.
Right.
It is so hard, right?
Yeah.
Like, I cannot imagine trying to wake up and go, what am I going to do with Captain America? He's been around for 80 years.
Oh,
what are you going to do with Captain America?
Right.
It's not already been done, right?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with the Hulk? I don't know. I didn't want that job,
Yeah.
right? So the thing that was great about Boom is it changed all the time.
Yeah.
Right. It's like some license sunsets and you launch something new and here comes something that's killing children. And, here, all this stuff's going on all the time.
And then you talk
to just
Keanu
changed.
Reeves.
Right. Then you talk to Keanu.
Right. Like I'm sitting across some Slash and Keanu Reeves. I'm like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And it was crazy. The phone would ring. The wildest stuff. It was a lot of fun.
So you lived comic books like a rock star is basically what we're hearing. That's
Well, okay, so I'll go the other way, and that's a good segue because everybody wants to know why I walk away,
right.
And I'll tell you this: like Levitt said, comic book publishing is like drinking adrenaline for breakfast. And the part you don't see is the phone rings and the truck has broken down from the printer to the distributor. The books are going to be late. They can't be late. They're missing their window. They can't miss their window. What about the distribution warehouse? What about, there's somebody in the design department went to the hospital, somebody said something on a Zoom that gets them fired, that they said they made a casual joke. Mm-hmm. They've been employed by the company for 8 years and they're just a core salt of the earth good dude that you got to go fire.
Right.
I mean, it's stressful.
Yeah.
It is not getting to hang out with Keanu Reeves all day. It is the nitty gritty of, marketing. And it's like the marketing meeting where every single month you're like, okay, here's a fresh crop of books. Mm. Who's got a hook?
Right.
Yeah.
How are we going to sell this book? Mm-hmm. There are no ideas. I had a great marketing department, super proud. I'm not, I'm just saying it's a grind.
Oh, right.
12 times a year, you got 3-4 new books a month and you got to figure out how to sell everybody's book. And the thing is, you don't want to fail those creators.
Right.
So it's a lot. And all the conventions start to blur together. You're on the road and it's like all the bands talk about touring and it's like all the cities start to look the same. And, it is intense. And, I didn't understand how much stress I was under until I finally hit send on the social announcement. Like I remember I put it on Instagram and I completely fell apart.
Yeah.
Like I didn't realize how I was just holding on until the finish line. Yeah. And then I just felt this wave after wave after wave of stress coming off of me. And I had no idea. I remember during COVID, my wife was worried I was going to have a heart attack.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been a tough time for any public.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
Distribution shut down for 2 months.
Yes. God.
Well, you just ruined my title. I can't call this from rock star to stay at home dad now. I have to come up with something else.
Well, you could put overworked, stressed out to stay at home dad.
How hard making comics actually
might be a fun job, but it's still a job.
Right.
Yeah. And here's the thing: is like you've never published comics until you've killed yourself on something you absolutely love, and then retailers don't order it.
Oh.
And God bless retailers. Retailers know how much I love them. I've spent 2 decades being their biggest booster, one of their biggest boosters. And so I'm not accusing them, but it's just like the heartbreak that you have. You have all these expectations creatively and you get excited about certain things. And then, it all falls apart and you got to go to the next thing. You got to shake it off and you can't be discouraged and you got to have as much enthusiasm for some creator's new project because they deserve that kind of focus and attention.
Sure.
And so it's a lot. Yeah. It is a lot.
Mm.
So I have one last question because we've taken up a lot of your time this time. We'll see next time. Since now that you've retired from the comic book business basically and you're staying at home, are you going to go back and start reading again? Like, are you going to be buying comics and reading comics?
Never stopped.
Never stopped. Okay.
Okay.
Like what do you like right now that you're reading? What do you
Well, the book that just blew me away was Batman and Robin Year One.
Told you.
I was just telling me how I have to read this.
It was Mark Waid. It was absolutely fantastic. The storytelling of the relationship between him, Batman and Robin, as told from both perspectives, was one of the best Batmans I've read in a long time.
It is one of the best of there's a storytelling fundamental structure. Like, I've probably read that comic 5 times. And I actually poor Waid, I was like emailing him about it. I was like,
It's funny, he's still doing it. I mean, he's still doing it at such a high level. I've been a huge fan for years, and it's still
insane.
Good stuff.
It's insane. 35 years more.
He's got a lot of stuff coming out too. He's got like 3 or 4 more DC books coming out. I think he's in his. I don't think we've seen. I feel like he's Captain Kirk, who sat down on the desk. The how I'm going to get my Star Trek references all screwed up.
I know
on the deck of the Enterprise. And it's like the way that he has that absolute power event, and he's got Batman and Robin Year One, and the way he's got Justice League Unlimited coming, I just think he's the happiest lad in Christendom. And the thing about that, Sam Neill is the one. I mean, Waid deserves all the accolades, and he gets them. He deserves them. All hail Mark Waid. Period. Full stop. But Sam Neill. It is just like it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, that guy just empties his clip. Like, I'm going to carry copies of that with me to conventions because I get people that ask for portfolio review. And one of the things I try to talk about is page design.
Yeah.
And artists don't understand what I mean. And it's like, I want to pull that out because there just isn't a page that Sam Neill hasn't the sense of, like, not the panel to panel, he crushes that. Not the storytelling, he crushes that. Not the rendering, he crushes that. He places his blacks better than most people do. But it's just the way the page coheres.
Right.
Like, one of the things they teach you in art school is you take your composition, you turn it upside down, and then you can see all the flaws. And you just turn those pages upside down. There's nothing wrong with them.
Right.
Like, the guy is just like, holy crap.
That's
like, I don't understand if I haven't been watching him as closely as I should have, or he's hit a whole new gear.
Yeah.
But he did Firepower, right?
I don't know.
I don't know. No, I've never heard it.
Yeah. It was a Kirkman book at Image. I think he did Firepower, and I read all that stuff. But man, and I love Firepower. It was cool. Kirkman's genius.
Too.
Yeah. But man, this Batman and Robin Year One just
really, really good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I got to.
I learned stuff.
Batman. I didn't expect it to be that good from Batman.
Yeah, and look, God bless Batman and everything, but like, I've been reading Batman for 40 years. Right, like, I don't need another Batman comic.
Exactly.
And I'm not smack talking anybody. Like,
sure.
Clearly Waid and Sam Neill proved me wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, look about how many Batman titles are on the stands every month now. There's got to be 6 every month now. I know, because I read
a lot more than that.
I know, I buy all of them, so I know that's how I know. But this one just really stood out. I buy every one. I do.
I know.
Yeah, if you're interested in doing comics, I would say, and I don't care if it's independent or mainstream, like that book. Woo!
Yeah, all right. When you go, buy it tomorrow.
You'll probably rate it. You'll probably rate it. Be like, Robin. Okay, cool.
No,
but it's just
it's funny. We would just talk. That's before we came on. We were sitting here for about 20 minutes, and I said, "Have you read Batman and Robin?" And he's like, "No." I was like, "It's fantastic."
Yeah, I got to get to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the time. No, thank you for your time. We would really appreciate it.
Love to have you on again if you ever want to come on. If you get bored,
I appreciate it.
If you get bored in your new position,
yeah.
Watch out! 6 months from now, I'll be like, "Please talk to me." Please talk to me.
One peanut butter and jelly sandwich too many. And reach out.
I might already be there, but we'll see. All
and
right.
we may email you with questions because as we go on, we have a tendency to email people we've spoke to before. Just a question relates to you.
Yeah.
Sure.
We regularly email Mike Allred now, just random things.
Mike Allred is a national treasure. He's probably a global treasure.
We love him.
He might be the nicest person that we've had contact with.
We'll email him a weird question and he gets back right away to us. And here's what happened.
It's like
paragraph.
texted him.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, no. Like, what?
He's the best, man. What a talent. He and his wife.
Yeah.
Delightful people.
Thank you so much for being on this. This was great for us. Thank you. And we will definitely talk again. Take care. Have fun. Enjoy your retirement.
Enjoy Manhattan.
I'm actually going there tomorrow, so I will not, but thank you.
Have a good one. Thanks, guys. Thanks.